This is Sales Grit, the enterprise sales podcast dedicated to helping you win more deals and to help you separate yourself from the pack. I'm VK. Let's get after it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on my very first podcast. It's called Sales Grit. My name is Vrahram, Kadkhodaian. I'm the CEO of Prolifiq, where we help sales teams sell smarter and together, and they win more because of it. Being that this is my first podcast, I had to make it a very special one with a very special guest. I've asked a longtime friend, mentor, someone that means a lot to me, Bruce Cameron, to join me on my very first podcast. And, before I go any further, I just want to give you guys some perspective here. I was 25 years old taking on my first assignment in enterprise sales. And Bruce was the president of CDC Software, and he ran a couple different businesses that CDC Software owned. I worked for the company called Pivotal. And, we were at McCormick and Schmick's. I was a BDR, and this is intended for a lot of sales leaders, salespeople, people that are up and coming in their careers to learn from. And we went to McCormick and Schmick's. I remember Bruce had the fish and chips and I got a burger. And he asked me, he said, so you want to go into sales? I said, yeah. He's like, well, I'm going to give you a shot, and you're going to work with some great people, but always keep learning, always practice, and always do your best to evolve your skill set and to learn from those around you. You got raw talent, but you've got to develop and you got to invest in yourself. And I can't thank Bruce. I thank Bruce with all my heart, and I'm just so happy that Bruce can join us. Bruce, say hello and introduce yourself to the people listening.
Yes, Vrahram, thank you for those kind words. I'm Bruce Cameron, and remember the day when Vrahram first came into the office, and he sat at a desk and always had notes up in front of his desk of who he talked to, who he's going to talk to next, what he was going to accomplish each day. And if anything, I wanted to get notes from my own desk because I was jealous about how organized Vrahram was, even on day one. But he set a tone for the office. We've had it's been probably 20 years now, a friendship. And it's been very great to see Vrahram progress. A lot of people ask me what I accomplished in my career. And I think the number one thing was a mentor. And I've got probably about 15 guys like Vrahram that I consider family. And their success really is my success. So it's been great.
That's awesome, Bruce. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So let's get after it here. We've got, a whole bunch of questions that we want to ask to give our listeners some perspective and to help them out with their careers, primarily in tech, primarily in enterprise software, whether it's capital or SaaS. But why don't you get us started and talk to us a little bit about your career and how it's evolved?
Sure. So I grew up just north of New York City, 20 miles from Yankee Stadium. I went to school in upstate New York at a school called RIT, got my engineering degree. And the one thing about computers in those days, we used punch cards. And I was actually on the basketball team. And every time I went and brought my card deck to the computer center, I got these massive fingers. And I'd have one card out of order. And they used to throw the card deck at me and said, you need to practice more typing. And I honestly thought if I had anything to do with computers coming out of school, it would be crazy. And my first job was actually teaching people to program CNC machine tools using a computer. It was a digital computer. And I'd been in application software for 40 years, and I wouldn't have traded it for the world. I have 4 sons that are all in different aspects of application software, one in management, one in enterprise sales, doing extremely well. I got one that's in pre-sales that absolutely loves it. And the 4th son actually sells golf course sands and topsoil and things of that sort. And I consider that enterprise because he's talking right to the owner of the golf course. What does he want to do? He helps in golf course design and things of that sort. So very, very happy about the career I chose and the fact that a lot of my sons have chose that as well.
You breed them too, Bruce.
There's no question. And the one thing I did because a lot of people say, why wouldn't you hire your sons for your company? And I worked for my dad for a year, and that was about 10 years worth of life I lost. My dad and I are very different. My sons and I are very different, but I always been there for them as a mentor, but consciously would never have them report to me because I always want them to be my son, and I didn't particularly want to be their boss. That's a tough thing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. They're all great boys, and I've loved getting to know them. So let's talk a little bit about the rep, Bruce, right? So from when you started to your days at CDC, taking companies public and doing all this amazing stuff, whether it was capital, whether it was SaaS, talk to us a little bit about the evolution of the rep. How has the rep evolved in your career and the different roles and companies you've been a part of?
Sure. And I think with the rep is also what he's selling. So when I started back in the mid 70s, the software at that point was IBM financials. So the reps in those days were IBMers that stood, you can't go wrong by choosing IBM and things of that sort, selling huge systems and things of that sort. And they'd bring in teams of people and all sorts of stuff. But then you went from that to things like CAD, then you had workstations and Unix and things of that sort. So you had to sell to the VP of engineering, really understand what he wanted, whether you're designing at Boeing, which probably had some of the best CATIA IBM CAD systems ever, or even a small job shop that had to draw up their parts and make sure they were going to work before they could ship them. But the sales guys were way too involved in the hardware and the operating systems, in my opinion, back in those days. But they really had no choice because all of this was really new. Then 2000s, we got into CRM, but the operating systems. Are you Unix? Are you open systems? What database do you use? And you spend so much time on that and so little time on this is what my application is going to do to benefit your business. Unfortunately, and 2010, in my mind, was the decade of data. I've got all this data and I want to use it and things of that sort. You have a lot of data analytics companies and things of that sort. A lot of very, very successful. And they're right. There's data all over these disparate systems. They have trouble talking to each other. By the time you get the data and analyze it, it's too late. People are still forecasting with history and not forecasting the future and things of that sort. So again, the poor sales guy is caught with too much of an IT sale and not enough of a business sale. Right. And one of the things when I say I've been in application my whole career, I didn't want to sell operating systems. I didn't want to sell hardware. I wanted to get right to the business person that was going to benefit most by my software, my solution, and establish a relationship and show him the benefits of that. And now, and unfortunately, I retired probably a little bit too soon. You get this thing called cloud. And cloud basically allows you, ignore the hardware. You don't have to worry about sizing. Ignore the database. Ignore the data, because we'll get you data in any form that you want and this kind of thing. Now you're talking about the processes, both in the sales process for you to sell the customer and the process that the customer is trying to improve upon in his own business. As an engineer, I'm all about process. A lot of people say, why would you go to an engineering school to be a sales guy? Well, the first thing you do in sales, in engineering, is you separate your constants from your variables. Sales is just like that. What are your constants? Well, the constants is this company is profitable. And the constant is that president's been there 10 years. And they're an IBM platform and they're never going to change. The variables, they have no idea exactly what they want this application to do. They think they have to buy it from SAP and these kind of things. And the engineer / salesman really have got to get to the bottom of the variables and focus on them, because you're not going to change constants kind of thing. And so today, selling cloud, and Vrahram's talking about SaaS. SaaS was a big thing right when I left the industry about 8 or 9 years ago. But I would say the cloud really puts the onus now on the salesman. the customer really doesn't understand the cloud, nor does he need to. He can take it for granted, and you can go anywhere in the world, any one of his divisions, any language, and sit down with them and say, this is how my solution is going to affect your business. It's the greatest time for selling ever, but you can't be meek and mild. You got to do your homework. You got to study your customers' businesses, and you got to really be able to convert that to a financial justification so that he can see quickly the benefits that he's going to get. So sales today is more of an art form than ever. And all of the garbage, the hardware, the database, all that stuff is behind you. And now it's pure solution to problem kind of discussion.
Yeah. You know, you're the person that introduced me to solution selling. And ever since then, I've been a student of it. And one of the most important parts of solution selling is the economic impact, right? What is the business value that this person is going to get as a result of your solution, your services, you being involved in their life? So just something natural for you, right? When you think about reps, and, you know, I think most reps struggle with this part of selling on how do they justify the impact or the business impact or the economic impact of the deal or what they're trying to sell the customer. What advice would you give to a rep that's just starting off, wanting to get really good at selling the economic or the business impact? What are some things that you would ask them to consider or look into, or, you know, spend some time learning to help them with that?
Okay, let's first start with, you know, I looked at my career. I probably had 200 or 300 salesmen reporting to me throughout my career, and I picked out the bits and pieces of the absolute best rep. The best rep that probably, and he lacked I always had to do his PowerPoints, and I was president of the company back then. This was before CDC, but the guy could sell. And he would always come to me and say, this is the reason we're not going to get the deal. Every other one salesman is telling me, oh, you know, you're going to win this date, and it's on my forecast, and we can't lose, and we're going to do this. And I had him out to lunch, and he let me buy him a $42 steak. And this rep would always sit me down because he knew I was the one that could fix everything. These are the three things that we're going to lose this deal by. And in the beginning, it was the first rep I ever had communicate with me like that. And I said, you're very, very negative. He says, no, it's just the opposite. I want to win. And you're going to win by addressing the things that the customer thinks you can't do. And we got to get those fixed. I'm not wasting my time on all the good stuff because that, you know, that we have going for us. The very best reps, and Vrahram did this well, a lot of sales guys don't like getting their bosses involved. You gotta get your executives clamped in, CEO to CEO, president to president, VP to VP. You gotta do that as early as you possibly can, because that allows you as a salesman, that's the only time you'll have any control. Okay, because when you need to escalate anything, you now have a relationship, and you should escalate it right along with your management. Now, some guys work for people, they call them VP of sales prevention. If you're working for a company like that, I would quit because you're never going to make a lot of money. Okay, your VP and your CEO and your president, they should be capable of going toe to toe with their peer at your prospect, so that your company is well aligned at all levels, so that you can do your job knowing that other people are doing their job, allowing you to win the deal. I went the same sales guy with the negative Nelly. We're in Jockey's Menswear. We were sold in the first apparel system. This is back in mid '90s. It's about a $2.5 million software, and we're walking through the back of Jockey in the back room, and he points to a guy. He says, "That guy's getting fired in 3 weeks. He doesn't know it yet." Now I'm thinking, my salesman, he doesn't know what he's talking. He's just, you know, pulling my leg. He knew every bit of politics going on in that company. And once we found out that guy was going to be let go, you know, I started realizing how valuable was that information, because that guy wanted, you know, he wanted our proposals and our quotes and all this. Well, he wasn't going to do anything with it. He was a time suck for us. Yeah. So, you know, good salesmen got to be conversationalists. Yeah. And I'm I'm an engineer. I'm an introvert. Okay. And I'm a New Yorker. You can't be a New Yorker in Chicago. You can't be a New Yorker in Texas and this kind of thing. So, there's some acting involved, whether it's your accent, whether you change to an extrovert for your deal and things of that sort. But you got to be able to have your team picking and finding every bit of good information to help get the deal. And then you got to find your foxes. The foxes are the guys that don't want you to win, the guys that are painful to sell. Many companies, I always got the fox, even though I was either general manager or the president. Bruce, we've assigned you the CIO. And I'm like, he's got the personality of a dead person. Why do I have him? Because you're the only one that can turn him around. And he's going to love having the general manager on him because he's going to feel more important. And I started to realize that was kind of my role in a lot of sales situations, is to get that guy out of the way of my sales team. Because all he was doing was confusing the team. And, he was never happy with anything. And so I would sit next to the fox and develop a conversation with him and, let him ask me directly so he wasn't going to derail the group discussion and things of that sort. So again, don't have happy years. Talk about with your management why you're not going to win the deal. Establish those executive pairings quickly. Make good friends and good relationships. The best salesman the customer thinks that every person in that prospect is the salesman's best friend. They don't know any better that he's got 40 best friends there. They're that kind of good. And they remember everybody's name and they remember everybody's personality. When you're selling $1 million deals and huge deals that are touching almost everybody in the company, and if the deal doesn't work, the CIO gets fired, which is the way it was back in the 90s and early 2000s. You got to do that. And you got to get those foxes covered. You can't avoid them. They'll kill your deal. So you take that to the younger guys. I want kids, and I had the opportunity when Vrahram started. My son went to University of Wisconsin, and there were some pretty talented kids that I knew pretty well graduating. They're all doing extremely well today. But they would have no hesitation to come up to me and start a conversation or start with anybody. That's number one. Number two, they didn't like to lose. And, sales guys that take losing easily, yes, you've got to get your losses behind you, but boy, you got to learn from them very, very quickly and not make that same mistake twice. And a lot of guys, when they lose, you can tell a lot from a sales guy the night after he lost a big deal. And if they take that too lightly, it's just probably not going to make a lot of money. But if he's still fretting about it 4 days later, he's not going to make a lot of money then either. You got to lose it. You got to find out what the heck happened. And I've had a couple deals we've been able to turn around. My boss at a company called JBA, I took him for the lost win report. And I knew we were up against JD Edwards, now owned by PeopleSoft. I knew we should have won that system. And the problem was my sales guy. And it was funny because the same sales guy that, I'm doing his PowerPoints and everything, and I'm on his case about you need to be more technically savvy and all. And he talked me into hiring this sales guy who ended up being horrible. And my buddy looks at me and he says, the sales guy, he says, don't you appreciate me that much more? And I learned an awful lot. Number one, I'm never going to hire another sales guy from the recommendation of a sales guy. But it's incredibly important. You got to have that chemistry. And you as managers got to get out in the field with your guys, measure that chemistry. What can be done? Sometimes it's not the sales guy's fault. Your pairings are so incredibly important, of personalities, of intelligence. So if you got a golfer, pair them up with a golfer and to do things like that with your customers. So you look at that with the young guys, you want people to be smart. But for me, and I've had Harvard PhDs interview for sales positions, and nothing against Harvard or anything, but I need street smart. I need a guy that can read a street, that can read a situation quickly. Now, smart guys hopefully can read quickly and then do something about it. But, a lot of things go right over a sales guy's head that doesn't really understand what's going on in the streets. So I actually did a thing for a company as a consulting project where I work my best sales guys backwards and throughout their lives to show them, at 12 years old, at 15 years old, at 18 years old, you can tell a guy that's going to be a salesman. My dad was a salesman. My father-in-law was a salesman. My dad sold machine tools. He used to demo on Sundays and Saturday. I never saw my dad. And I'm like, boy, sales it's the worst job in the world. By the time you're done, you're making $5 an hour with all his demo time. My dad never knew how to ask for the deal. And he demoed himself, and he knew that machine better than anybody. And it taught me you can learn so much more. You just get face to face with your decision maker and the strategist from their side and find out what's going on. So again, the young guys, you hire them, and if you don't know after a month, they also need to be a pain in the ass to management. There's no perfect sales culture. Everybody's trying to build a culture, but you're trying to build it from your sales guys up. A lot of people don't appreciate the fact that sales guys don't have anybody reporting to them, but your best sales guys make the most amount of money in a company, and they wield the most power. All right. And guys, I have son number 2 doesn't want to get into management. He has a lot of flexibility, is only himself to worry about. But boy, when his deal is one day late and it misses a quarter end, he gets crushed. But that's he's comfortable with that. But you gotta, sales guys that get hired, and I don't, even as president of the company, and I had 1,500 people reporting to me, I knew who Vrahram was. Yeah. There are other guys I didn't, and they got to come up to me. I can't go around to 1,500 people, but I'll make time for anybody who knocks on my door and wants to sit down and tell me something we got to do to improve ourselves or make our company better. You got to get in front of management in your first couple of weeks. Ask questions, because that's when you start making your mark. And if a guy's not capable of doing that, it's bad. And when you're having a first interview with a prospective sales guy, and guys, I do a lot of interview coaching. Who asks the most questions? If your prospect is asking you more questions than you're asking him, get out of sales. Yeah. You're not going to learn anything with him asking you questions. You want to know about what does this take my career? And what does your top sales guy make? How long has he been with the company? I want to ride with them for a day and see the day in the life of your best rep. When is your next release coming out? And things like that. If you're not asking those questions of the hiring manager and of the president and the CEO and those kind of things, you're not going to be a good sales guy. You got to win the question contest, as far as I'm concerned. I'm rambling, Vrahram. This
is a lot of sound advice. I'm just letting you go, Bruce. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how much knowledge is just coming out of your mouth. I hope everyone really soaks it up. I've got two final questions for you, and I think they're relatively important questions. When you think about your career, and not that you've got some magic ball where you can tell the future, but when you think about the profession of sales over the next 5 to 10 years, how do you think that's going to continue to evolve?
And that's probably the hardest question of all. As the solution gets more pointed to what the customer wants or the salesman thinks he needs, it puts a lot of pressure on the salesman to really understand the business. To say, okay, we sell financial software, we'll do your general ledger, accounts payable, and that kind of stuff, that's fine. But when you're getting into one solution I've had some experience with, it's called MES, Manufacturing Execution Systems. When you're driving robotics on your shop floor, which is becoming huge, and your software is driving millions of dollars worth of assets. You're not selling it for people anymore. You're selling it for automation purposes. You gotta really become a student of your customer and a student of your products. And the colleges, they're just starting to teach selling, but it's much more than that at this point in time. Everybody, they call it enterprise, but they're really selling point solutions, best of breed point solutions. We weren't allowed to do that back 20 years ago because you had hardware and database integration problems and all that stuff. With that stuff gone, you really need to understand the benefit of what your solution can do for a customer. Process is everything. Everybody wants process. A lot of the software companies are getting bought by private equity. Private equity, that's all they understand. The processes that lead to the financials. What's your sales process? What's your forecasting process? All this kind of thing. And you break these processes down into manageable chunks. And as a salesman, you got to be able to do that. And you can't take, old sales guys that come into these days, and the old sales guys will laugh things off and say, well, I got a great relationship. I'm going to be able to leverage that as much as I want. It doesn't work that way anymore. You really got to know your stuff. And, you see a lot of the very successful companies out there, and you look at their sales team, those guys are top notch.
Yeah.
And, you've got to be that way.
Absolutely. No, you're right. No, you're right, Bruce. You're absolutely right. Things are changing. Things are getting more specialized. Skill sets need to evolve. That whole concept of enterprise sales and point solutions is a really interesting one. I never thought about it that way, but as I think about the different products I've sold over the past 5 to 10 years, that's very accurate. It's an interesting one. All right, let's round it out with the last question, which I think is a really, really important one. And it's tied to the same advice that you gave to me at McCormick's when we sat down and had lunch. And it was to the advice that you would give a rep today on where to invest themselves. Where should they spend more time learning about something? How should they approach something? Where should they really roll up their sleeves? Whether he or she wants to get better at selling, where would you direct them right now, to invest that time?
Sure. In my career, one of the biggest changes made was horizontal selling versus vertical selling. And my first vertical sales job was at JBA. In fact, I helped convert the company from a UK-based ERP company that could sell anything to anybody in the UK. But in the US, it just didn't work that way. And I broke the company up into an apparel software company, a service management, automotive, because front end auto entry automotive is very, very unique to that particular industry, and a couple others. And we focused our sales force by vertical. And then I moved on to a company called QAD that's all they have is vertical products. It's hard to do sometimes, but if it were me and I want to go out and make the most amount of money, I would pick a vertical niche, whether it be healthcare, whether it be manufacturing, whatever. Don't be everything to everybody. Find your vertical niche and become an expert in it, and really understand where that's going. Obviously, you're going to want a vertical niche that's going to last. A lot of people didn't think that healthcare, Epic, that company out of Madison, that company's huge. If you go into a hospital and they don't have Epic, most people leave that hospital. They don't want anything to do with it. That's how ingrained they've become with their customers. It's fantastic. That's where you want to be. And when I say enterprise versus point, it's kind of changed a little bit. We're selling today point solutions that affect everybody in the company.
Right.
Whereas before, you're affecting a point solution that affected that one guy on that one piece of machinery or the one computer and that kind of stuff. You may be changing user interfaces. You may be changing how people are measured and this kind of stuff, but it's done throughout the company. I consider that enterprise because you're touching everybody, not necessarily with a solution that does everything. Companies are not buying financial solutions anymore. They're really not buying CAD. Even CRM, Salesforce have made that into a commodity at this point in time. They're buying a solution that affects the most amount of people in their company. And as far as I'm concerned, that's all about enterprise.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great words of advice, Bruce. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. You got a special place in my heart, Bruce.
Well, Vrahram, you know that all you got to do is call, and I'll be there in a heartbeat. You haven't called any time lately to have 6'8" come in and close a big deal. So obviously you're doing quite well, which I'm very happy about. But the one thing you got going for you many things, but you've been there, done that. I carried a bag. I didn't get into management. I was still pretty young. I was about 28 years old. You've been there. You understand the game. You get these people that don't necessarily carry the bag in their career. And it's hard for especially a new salesman to relate to someone that's never walked his walk. So, your company is very, very lucky to have a guy like you that's been there, done that. And you got more energy than I know. One Vrahram story we had, I just met him, and you see his name, and I said, Vrahram, you got to change your name. I says, let's change something short. How about, John Smith or something? And you looked at me in all seriousness, said, if they don't want to take the time to spell my name, I don't know if I want to sell them anything. And I never forgot that. And I said, you're absolutely right, even though I still call you VK because I'm not a good speller. But no, I really appreciate you thinking of me, and anything I can do for you or your company, I'm a phone call away, buddy.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. All right, everyone. Thanks for your time. Let's get after it.